the
Sorry.
Sorry
That's
about
okay.
that.
That's it. That's cool. So we know that the financial packages will be of importance in the January to March period. So we thought that we would start getting ourselves out in front of people. So the presentation I have today is fairly basic because I didn't know what level of chapters and chapter finance people I was going to meet. So I've kept it very basic, but I'm looking for your input as to topics that are of concern to you when you're pulling together your finances for your chapter. So if you want to use the comments section to put in your questions as we go along, with so few of us, we can make it a little bit more interactive than maybe the other meetings that we've got scheduled. So with that, we'll go ahead and start. So we're going to talk about accounting and financial records. We're going to touch on the basics of financial literacy. We're going to talk about record keeping requirements, review a sample balance sheet, look at a profit and loss statement, and then talk about how you're going to forecast your revenue and your budget for the coming year, because that is one of the components of the financial packages that we ask you to submit at the start of next year. So basic financial literacy, it's the ability to understand and apply various financial skills, including financial management and budgeting. And we do that through a series.
Are you showing
I'm
the
not.
slides?
Oh, there we go again. Me and my sharing my screen. I apologize. I only have like 3 screens in front of me, so you gotta bear with me.
There we go.
There we go.
can see the
Yes.
the
Let me put it onto slideshow. Where's slideshow?
to the right.
I think you can hit the F5 button.
Oh,
Yeah, we can do that too.
okay.
Um,
And then it went away, or is it there?
well, right now you're in the kind of your editing mode.
Yeah, it jumped screen. Hold on a second. For some reason, it went.
Elizabeth, if you on your menu at the top where you can share your screen again.
Yeah, let
There's
me
a
find.
slideshow option and you can decide which screen you want it to show on.
Here we go. I think this is the one. How's that?
There you go.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I love my additional screens. It's very helpful, but when it comes to these things, all of a sudden it's on all 3 of my screens. So it's like overload. And I have a really bright pink, so I'm really like wide awake now. So okay, so we're going to talk about record keeping. So record keeping is the basis of all of this, and I think most of you are in either treasurer or president position. Is that correct for this group? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you can imagine that as the treasurer, getting the paperwork, getting the information from the people who were actually incurring the expenses or contracting with a vendor to do something on behalf of your chapter. That's part of the battle, right? We're not always, as the treasurers and the finance people, we're not always in the room when the meeting happens, and we are hearing about it after the fact. So one of the things you want to do is set up some really good record keeping so that you have the documents available when you need them. And to do that, you want to be able to get the information as soon as possible, which mostly comes down to keeping open lines of communication with the rest of your office or staff to find out like what's going on. The other thing about financial accounting, which is really good, is if you have a scheduled date in order to establish consistency. You may have a chapter that does a lot of activities. And so for you, consistency might be having to sit down every week to find the paperwork, to make the entries, to pull all that information together, just so that you can stay on top of it. Other chapters will not have as much activity going on, and maybe once a month works in that situation. And I can appreciate how, coming out of COVID, that frequency is probably going to change. Hopefully it changes for the better as we exit 2021 and get into 2022. So think about doing small bits more frequently in order to stay on top of things. You also want to make sure that you're tailoring your record keeping system to your chapter. Again, some chapters are going to be very busy, others less so. The amount of work that you do is not as important as the quality of the work that you do. Meaning, if you have a simple manila folder and you have one for each month of the year, and into that folder, you put every receipt, every bank deposit, every bank statement, every check, copy of a check that you wrote. If you put all of those into one folder called October 2021, you have the basis of your financial statements, and it's all in one place and it's easily accessible. There are more complicated systems. Certainly the advent of computer software accounting packages has made the process a lot easier. It doesn't require that you have any sort of advanced understanding of accounting. If you can deposit a check, if you can write a check to pay, you basically can record the entries that are necessary to run the finances of your chapter or your own small business. Okay, next slide is not coming up. Okay. Come on. And we love this part of.
There's an arrow on the bottom left.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Heather. Okay.
Can I just interject here?
Yeah.
Elizabeth, you're fine if we have electronic folders too. So not paper folders.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yes, you can be as complicated as you want. You can be as forward thinking around computers and putting things out on the cloud so that you want to make sure that you have multiple backups if you're having electronic folders, because we all know that computers can go out, electricity, internet, whatever. So with a computerized system, you want to make sure you have plenty of backups around. Thumb drives, cloud backup, several different things. And of course, a lot of those things also require passwords. And you want to make sure that you have a list of those passwords and that your officer staff have access to that, just in case, car accident or whatever. You want to make sure that that information is accessible to the rest of the officers. Chapter metrics. This is, again, part of the customization of how you want to think about what is best for your chapter. You want to be able to measure and report back on events, trade shows, if you do membership drives, if you have certain marketing efforts. I'm sure that you guys have, in your mind, certain things that your chapter either do on an annual basis, or maybe for 2022, you're thinking about starting some new activity to grow your membership or to grow the revenue opportunities and supplier partnerships that are in your area. Those are the kinds of customizations that we're talking about. And you can set up in your chart of accounts an account number for that, so you can collect all that information in your accounting record in one place, and then it makes it easier to find it as you go along. So okay, the point about collecting data is so that you can analyze it, so you can report back on it, so that you can measure your success or your achievement of particular steps along a goal towards a better success. And some of the things that you may want to look at are what months do you do the most business? We all know that travel tends to be cyclical. And so there's probably certain times that you find it's worthwhile to do a membership drive. But if you were to do it in another month when all the agents are overworked, booking spring breaks, you're not going to get very much in play on your request for membership drive. So you probably have a certain cyclicalness to the work that you do. You probably already have a group of suppliers that you work with. Maybe there's some new suppliers that moved into the area, or there are some new suppliers in the travel industry that you and your team want to get in contact with and build relationships with. So those are the kinds of things that you want to, again, what is important to your chapter? What are the things you've identified for 2022 to move you guys forward? And then in the travel side of things, which months do you promote more travel? Which months are the busiest for travel prep time? If all of the agents are off, booking for spring break, that's probably not a good time for you to have one of your trade shows, because you're not going to get a lot of traction there. And also you want to think about some of those processes by which you engage a supplier, or you work with a hotel or a restaurant to put on an event, to see if you can streamline some of that and make it simpler. Jasmine and I are very appreciative of the fact that you volunteer your time to ASTA and the chapters. And we want to make sure that you are getting the most benefit out of your time with the chapter. And to do that, it's helpful to look at processes and to see if there's ways that you can improve and simplify them so that you can all go on with your lives. Keeping a complete record of accounting documents is absolutely essential. And I like to tell people to keep documents for a minimum of 8 years. You will see in the IRS literature that the requirement is 7 years. And what is driving my use of the word 8 years is the fact that here in 2021 is the year that we filed the 2020 tax return. So I need to have 7 years backwards from 2020, but I'm in the year 2021. And so it's a little bit easier, I think, for most people to think of it as just go back 8 years, and then you'll have that covered period for the IRS. Not only do you have to keep the records, but it's absolutely essential that the records show and explain what the transaction was. And the best time to get that information documented is when it happens. So when you get a receipt for a meal, write on the receipt who attended it, what businesses they were, representing, what was the purpose of it. Those kinds of information are always best obtained right then and there, because I don't remember what I did last week. And as a volunteer organization, 3 years from now, if the IRS decides to audit something, we may not be here, first of all. And so the records are going to have to speak and support whatever sort of tax return entry we made. So always document, and writing on the receipt is perfectly acceptable. I've listed here a couple of documents which you're going to want to have as part of your permanent record base within the chapter. The first one is called an IRS EIN account letter. This is the letter by which the chapter was issued its federal tax ID number. And this probably was issued years, decades before you joined that particular chapter. You should ask around, you know, if your chapter has a folder or a box of permanent records that it passes on from officer staff to officer staff. Check and see if you have it. We have some of them here at ASTA headquarters, but I will tell you that I have found a lot of holes. And I don't have all the letters here. But that is one of those letters that is absolutely essential to help prove what your tax identification number is. And it comes up all the time when you're opening bank accounts. They want to know what your tax ID number is, and they want to see something that's official that issued it to you. Bank account statements, that's fairly straightforward. Credit card statements, if you guys, and in your chapter, if you accept credit cards and you have a merchant processor, you're going to want to save those credit card statements. Revenue invoices and receipts. This is when you are issuing an invoice to a supplier and they've said that they're going to sponsor your breakfast or sponsor your trade show. You need to keep those invoices that you have issued to them. And when they pay you, it's a good idea to make a copy of that payment and attach it to the invoice. Again, these are the kinds of things that you can do really simply and quickly in the moment. And 2 years from now, 6 months from now, even 6 weeks from now, if someone were to ask you for that, it would all be together in one place and it would save you time and agony trying to figure out where and what it was. Vendor invoices is the other way. If you are paying a restaurant or a hotel to rent the space, to have them cater a meal for you, they're going to send you an invoice. You're going to want to keep that invoice. You're going to want to attach the check or if you're using your bank account to issue payments through an ACH type of method, you're going to want to make a copy of that and attach it to the vendor's invoice again, so that you have those two documents together paired up, and then it makes it easier going on. 1099 forms. This is an IRS specific form. It is required anytime you pay a vendor $600 or more in a calendar year. These forms have to be either ordered on the IRS website, and there's no fee to do that, or any sort of Office Depot, Office Staples store somewhere starting next month. They will have a nice display place for these kinds of forms, and you can pick them up, and obviously there's a charge for them. But these forms are required of us as chapters to send to any vendor that we've paid $600 or more. The IRS is looking specifically for small independent businesses who might be tempted to not report that they got that $600 from you as income. And so the IRS has now made it the responsibility of the people, the companies who hire these small businesses, to have to report to the IRS their revenue. And it's gotten even more complicated in the last year or so. Asset lists. This is, again, some chapters will have assets, others won't. Assets can be things, checking account, investment account if you have excess funds and your chapter has an investment vehicle of some sort. If your chapter actually owns office equipment, that would be an asset. Not many of our chapters, from what I've seen, have assets. It doesn't make a lot of sense that they would have assets, but I put it in here just to cover the basis. Profit loss statements, balance sheets, those are annual type of financial documents, which we will go into a little bit more detail in the coming slides, but you definitely want to keep those forever because they support your annual tax return for your chapter. And of course, tax returns, you want to keep those forever. The tax returns for the chapters, because you're nonprofits, because most of the chapters have less than $50,000 a year in revenue, the tax return is literally a postcard. So it's really very simple, but it's very specific as to what it asks. And that's the reason why we come to you for those financial packages at the end of the year. So next slide. Any questions so far? Pretty basic. Everybody's pretty much at this level. Okay. All right. Some best practices. Again, it's all about the documents. How do you keep your documents? Do you have a process for handing over the critical documents to the next officer staff when they come in? Did you get a box or a bunch of folders from the last officer staff when you came into the position? That's really crucial in these volunteer organizations. If you're able to acquire an accounting software system, make sure it's one that generates records. Quicken QuickBooks is what we recommend here at ASTA. Again, very simple to use these accounting softwares. The trick is to make sure you have backups, multiple backups, and you have to have passwords on most backups. So you have to be able to pass that password along to the next officer class who comes in. Thirdly, you want to match your receipts and your records to your bank transactions. Again, this is just an easy thing to do if you are in the habit of sitting down once a month or once a week and going through the chapter's finances. The closer you are to the time that it happens, the closer you can ask the questions, get the document, make a note on the document as to who was involved in the event or the receipt, what was the business purpose, those kinds of things. And once you've got that documented and saved, you can move on to other things. And again, the last and most important thing is you have to back up and secure your records. Even if they're paper records, you need to make sure that you have them someplace safe. You want to make sure you transmit those along to the next officer class when they come in. Okay, so a balance sheet. Balance sheets record your assets, liabilities, and the equity that the chapter has over the course of its lifetime. This is a document that you probably will only prepare when you do the budget at the start of the year and at the end of the year when you print a budget and you send it, or when you print your financial package and send it in to us. Like I said, most of the chapters don't have complicated finances. So the things that you're going to see on your balance sheet are mostly going to be in this cash and current assets area. If you've got a checking account, or even if you are not big enough to have a checking account, but you just keep your money in an envelope, you're going to have cash that you want to record as an asset. The other area that you're going to have information in is this current liabilities. An accounts payable, think of it as you hold an event on October 29th, tomorrow, and you have a restaurant that has, supplied the food for your event. And by the time it gets to Monday, it's November 1st. And so that means that as of your October balance statement, you would have a payable to that particular restaurant. It says that you incurred and became liable for it in the month of October, but you haven't had a chance to pay it yet. It's what a payable is. Retained earnings comes in. That's your chapter's lifetime value, if you will, over the course of however many years the chapter's been open. And net revenue loss is the entry that comes in every year from your particular chapter's year's worth of activity. Some chapters make money, some chapters break even. This is where it comes over from the P&L. Okay, P&L. This is the basics of where you'll spend most of your time. This is where you account for the revenue that comes in and the expenses that you guys pay out. This is just a simple sheet. The columns here under income statement and expenses, these mirror what's in the treasurer's manual. So I kept it 1-to-1 so that it wouldn't be, it would make sense. And then literally it's just every month of the year and you total it at the end. You want to be able to, for tax purposes, we want to know supplier sponsorships, separate from meetings that you have for your chapters and get income there. We need to know that dues income, if you charge dues to your chapter members, we want to know that separate from the other kinds of income that you take in. And this is because the 990 form wants this kind of detail on it. In the expenses, you've got everything from ASTA, ASTA headquarters, reaching out for administrative fees for Real Magnet or insurance. If you guys use a bookkeeper or an accountant to do your chapter's finances, you can certainly do that if your chapter can afford such a thing, and you would record their fees separately from any other fees so that it can be identified for the taxes. You've got your basic internet, telephone, fax. You've got rent expense if you happen to rent a space to hold your meetings, or you have a chapter office that you keep open for any period of time, that would be rent expense. Travel expenses are a particular interest to the IRS. And so we have to be able to identify first class airfare separate from non-first class airfare. So we have travel expenses would be everything that's coach, everything that's airfare, bus, car, mileage, all that kind of stuff. But if your chapter allows and permits in its bylaws for first class airfare reimbursement to officers who travel, you would have to take that and separate it out. Also, if your chapter in their bylaws permit that spouses of officers can travel to events, then that would have to be broken out also. We recognize that there are different types of meetings that you and your officers may go to, so we've provided separate lines for those. And then if you are having a trade show, you're going to want to keep track of how much it costs you to put on your trade show. I've just put down here trade show expense as one, bucket. But if you have two different trade shows, you'd probably want to have two different buckets so that you can assess exactly which trade show brings in more attendees, brings in more revenue, which one is more efficient at spending the money from the trade show, those kinds of things. Okay. As I mentioned, the IRS has particular interest in things like travel and meals, entertainment, mileage, and gifts. Over the years, these are categories that change the rules all the time. Right now, during COVID, they relented on some of the restrictions around deducting meals and entertainment expense. But the basic rule with these for expenses is put it in a document, write on the receipt, answer the question, who attended, what was the purpose, you know, relate it back to a business event that your chapter was putting on, and do it as soon as you get the receipts, because this is the kind of stuff that the IRS loves to just call up and say, we have a question about. And, you know, 3 months from now, you won't remember why you spent $250 at a certain restaurant or club. And then, you know, it's a little nerve-wracking to be in front of the IRS and not have an answer right away. So for these 4 types of things, you definitely want to be extra vigilant in getting the receipts, noting on them what the purpose was, and making sure that you keep that receipt. Gifts is on here because the IRS is particularly interested in gifts if the gift was more for a personal reason than a business reason. Since you guys are representing chapters, I would think that the chapter would send flowers to a member who had become bereft of a family member. That would be a business thing. If your chapter provides food baskets at the holiday season to your suppliers, that would be a gift that would meet the standards of a business gift, and so it could be paid for by the chapter. Again, just write on, you know, what it is, who, why. As long as you've got those questions answered, you're going to be safe. Okay, so a couple of next steps to think about. You're going to want to find out what your chapter has done in the past to keep records, whether or not there is some box or some file someplace, electronic or paper, that has old documents that have been passed on from officer to officer. If you don't have that kind of thing, you're going to want to, you know, put something together there. You're going to want to make sure that you have a process for passing along these documents to the next officer class. And if at all possible, you want to have some written policies around vendors. In the Treasurer's Manual, we talk about having written policies around things like requiring 2 signatures on a check, having if your officer president is requesting a reimbursement, then the president should not sign the check to reimburse themselves. They should have the check signed by an alternate officer in order to, you know, keep a good accounting record of things. Okay. As I mentioned, it's the end of the year. The end of the year always makes me think about tax returns and finalizing my revenue receipts and finalizing my expense payouts. So here are some upcoming deadlines that the chapters are going to want to keep in mind, because you will have to do the activities associated with these deadlines. So December 31st, you're going to want to make sure that if any supplier owes you money, you collect it and get it deposited before the end of the year. Also, you want to pay your vendors. Doing these 2 things will simplify your accounting, because you won't have any sort of holdover payables or receivables that would impact your balance sheet. Then starting January 1st and up to January 21st, you're going to want to identify in the year 2021, did you pay some particular vendor $600 or more? Now, I made a mention that we're looking at small independent businesses. If you paid the Marriott Corporation $601, the IRS is not requiring us to send a 1099 to the Marriott. This is all about smaller independent shops, your local pizza place, you know, a small printing shop, those kinds of things. Those are the companies that you're going to want to see if you've got their what's called a W-9 form from them, that they attest to what their legal name is, their legal address, and their legal tax ID number is. It's not always the name that's on the side of the building. You know, companies have doing business as names, and then they have legal names sometimes. You want to have the legal name, and the W-9 form is how you would collect that information from them. January 31st is when the IRS requires that we send them all of our 1099 forms. It requires us to mail all those 1099 forms to the actual vendors, then take a copy of those 1099 forms, combine it with the summary, which is called a 1096 form, and we also have to file all of those with the IRS. Years past, these two activities used to be separated by like 28 days. But ever since I think last year, they've combined it where you just do both activities on the same date. It helps, I think, because then you're less likely to forget to do one part of it, but it is a new thing for anybody who's been doing this for years. It is something that's a little bit new for us. And then finally, between February 1st and March 15th, this is when you're going to prepare and submit your 2021 financial package and send it over to ASTA HQ. Okay, I think I just have one more slide here. So to help with any sort of documents, or if you have a desire to read what the IRS actually says, I've provided a series of URLs here so that you can go out and look at things. The thing that, again, I mentioned earlier, but the 1099 forms, you can go and look at the form on the IRS website, but it has big red letters that says, you know, do not download and use the form off of the site. I'm not sure why that's so important to them. It's the only form I know of that they have that notice on. You can take and download the F9 form, and you can print it as many times and send it as many times as you want. That's not a problem. But for some reason, they don't like the 1099s to be printed. The other thing that you might not know about, but as nonprofit organizations, we file a 990 form, and 990 forms are free to the public to view on the IRS website. So if you have a desire to see your chapter's tax returns back to whatever year they started, you can go to this website, create an account for yourself, and then you can see all the forms that were filed for your particular chapter in any year. You can also use it to look up any charity that you want to give money to see how they spend their money. It's here as well. So that's my presentation for today. I open up the floor to questions, or as I said at the outset, Jasmine and I are hoping to make our support of the chapters grow over the next year. And if you have suggestions or topics that are really at the heart of where you live with your chapter, please raise them.
Good job, Elizabeth.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Heather. Heather and I have done presentations at ABC, so that was my first introduction to this. So I appreciate the guidance and the training, Heather.
Yeah, of course. You're
Yeah.
sweet.
We will, as you know, Jasmine's recorded the meeting. We're going to have 2 or 3 more of these over the coming month and a half. You're welcome to come back to any of the other ones if you have more questions or you have more time. And of course, we can send the slides to you so that you can have them for your reference going forward.
Awesome.
I did record everyone who has attended tonight in my spreadsheet of recorded items. So I know which chapters have participated in the chapter treasurers roundtable as per the requirements and guidelines. So you don't have to worry about that. And then again, I can send out the slides to everyone as well, since I have everyone's name now.
I want to thank you all again for your volunteer time that you give to ASTA and to the chapters. I want to thank you for attending our series this evening. Again, I'm looking forward to providing more support at the level that you guys need it. And I look forward to future events where we get together.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Terrific.
Thanks, everybody.
Yay.
Thank
Have
you.
a good evening.
Good night,
You too.
everyone. Mhm.
Bye.